the lower right hand corner, John Perkins, who got a hold of me early, and he asked a question that would kind of define the direction of my life. He asked, "How do we build incentive in our youth?" And he meant, how do we create internal motivation? He just felt like our young people did not. There was no internal motivation for change or growth or moving forward. He says, how do we do that? He said, how do we build incentive in our youth? And so that became a defining quest for me. And as I began working with youth, I started looking for clues, and clues started to emerge. And she helped us create the Emerging Leaders Initiative, that high school aged group that learned how to serve and to lead, learn while leading. But all these were clues, and it came to me in the form of a equation. There are two truths. First, God has created mankind in his image. He's created us uniquely in his image. The second truth is that God has so designed human development that one issue dominates the adolescent phase of life, and that is the search for identity. Youth seek answers to identity questions like, who am I? Why am I here? And what is my purpose? And so if you have those two things, how does that impact youth ministry? If these things are true, then what is the purpose of youth ministry? Or put it another way, what is the church's responsibility to young people during this adolescent phase of life? And I came to the conclusion that it was to create an environment in which youth can discover who they are in Christ. We need to help them answer that question that they have been designed to ask at that time in their lives. And so as I wrote about this, as I applied it and then later on wrote about it, I came up with this name, which I originally thought was a original name, Transformational Discipleship. I mean, it came to me and I thought, that's a great name. And I thought it was original until I Googled the phrase. And I found out that it'd been used for 10 years. And some people, one person even wrote a manual on transformational discipleship, but it was pretty vague. And so I felt like I could co-opt the name, which is basically what I did. So I called this transformational discipleship. And this is how I define it. I define it as an approach to urban youth ministry. It's an approach. It's a new way of dealing with and thinking about urban youth ministry. It's an approach. It is centered on maximizing the adolescent leadership experience. And by centered, I mean it's focused. It's a view towards. Covey has this statement. One of his 7 principles is that you begin with the end in mind. And so you're looking at the end. What are you seeking to do or accomplish as a youth leader in this young person's life? You want to maximize their leadership experience, because it's within that they will discover. So it is centered on maximizing the adolescent leadership experience in ways that mold youth for future service, mold, craft, shape, prepare them for future service, and motivate the future leaders or the children that they influence. And by motivate, you're sparking a vision of what can be. So, an approach to urban youth ministry centered on maximizing the adolescent leadership experience in ways that mold them for future service and motivate the future leaders or the children that they, your emerging leaders, will influence. Let's break this down a little bit. It's an approach. And in this approach, you're tapping youth's natural desire to influence children. Tend to think of it more like the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. I mean, here we are conditioned. We tend to think in terms of we've got adolescent, early adolescent, and children. And each of them has their own curriculum. And we work with them independent of any other age group. Whereas really, the concept of taking a village to raise a child means that the children influence others. Your adolescents will influence the children. As they grow into early adolescence, then into adolescence, and it just does the same thing. You see that in large families. Families that have a lot of kids in them, you'll find that the kids are engaged or involved in the influencing and the development of their siblings. So adolescents want and need to make a difference if they have a natural desire to influence younger siblings. Okay, so it's an approach. You're maximizing the adolescent leadership experience. The way we think about leadership is really important. The reality is we all lead, and we all lead all the time. Again, we have it in our minds, many of us have it in our minds that leadership is for a chosen few. And for adolescents, they don't see themselves as leaders at all, but they are leaders. They make decisions. The first person we lead is ourselves. We make decisions. We set direction. We decide to do one thing or another thing. And we make decisions that in turn make us. And so we all lead all the time. And youth do as well. And there is a pathway to maximizing their leadership experience. So if you're thinking about, well, how do I get my young people to lead? How do we do that? There are some keys to doing that. And one of them is thinking, asking why, finding God's perspective. We'll talk about this later on when we talk about how we work with kids in a youth meeting setting. I find that is one of the most important times of working with young people. It's at that moment when you're with kids in a group, the opportunity to influence them by thinking. Starting a youth program, you should put that into their minds at the very beginning. We're gonna have a great time. This is gonna be a great program. We're gonna have a lot of fun. We're gonna travel and play games. We're gonna do all kinds of stuff. But there's one thing we're gonna do, and I'm gonna ask you to think. And when that time comes, I'm not gonna hurt you. It's not gonna take a long time. But when I ask you to think, you need to think. Okay? And just put that in there. It's not going to be very long, but you want to get them thinking that when we come to group, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to think. And then the second thing is apprenticing. Learning while doing, giving them something meaningful to do, meaningful to lead. and then help them learn while they are leading. The third is direction, molding youth for future service. And we're molding around identity discovery. We're not molding in the sense of teaching a lot of principles, although or doing presenting principles outside the context of their lives. We are doing that. We are teaching principles. We're teaching values. We're doing that, but we're doing it in connection with who they are and what they are driven to do, which is identity discovery. So we're molding around identity. And identity shapes direction. As they come to terms with who they are and their uniqueness, it will bring to mind the kinds of things that someone with their uniqueness can do. So it will shape the direction of their lives. And the framework for that discovery has to be within the context of animating the divine imprint. So it's not just doing a job, but it's doing a job that brings to life who they are. And as leaders, we help that process by pointing out to them their uniqueness. You can have the kids running a program. Say they're going to be running a club, an elementary club. Each of them will approach it differently. As they are involved in it, they'll each see things differently. Some will see the big picture. Some will just gravitate toward individual kids. Some will be sensitive to things that are going on with the kid. Some are going to be concerned about the organization. They're all different. They're all unique. And what we do is we help them see it. And then we help bring that to life and help them to see, yeah, this is your uniqueness. This is your unique contribution. And this is the kind of thing you should be looking at as you look at your future. Here are some quotes that help. This one, Haddon Robinson, he was my preaching professor at Denver Seminary. He made this statement: in any given situation, who you are determines what you see, and what you see determines what you do. Bob Beal, who designed the master planning program that we'll be talking about later, he said, define your uniqueness and maximize its use. And I love this one by Max Dupree. He said, we really should be in awe of human potential. And then Psalm 139, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. So that was direction. We've got an approach, leadership, direction. The last one is legacy. You're motivating the future leaders that they, the emerging leaders, influence. And this is what happens. Can I do what they are doing someday? That was the question when I did this years ago, that elementary kids would come into my office and ask me that question. During the 4 months leading up to the summer day camp, I was the coach. I was taking the role of the trainer. But when we got to the summer day camp, the youth leaders were in charge of running the program. I switched to being a chaplain. And so I would do the morning Bible studies with the leadership team. But then I'd go to my office and do other things. But occasionally a young person, an elementary kid, would come up to my office and ask the question, can I do what they're doing someday? It really is profound when you think about it from the vantage point of a kid looking out their neighborhood. What do they see? What are the options that they see? And if you're in an at-risk community, what are the options that they see? They're not very good options. But then they come to a program where the leaders are only a few years older than they are, and they're doing it well, and they're leading this program, and they're looking at them, and all of a sudden they've got another possibility of what they might be. So, two powerful results. For the child, it is possibility. I could actually do what they are doing someday. And for the emerging leader, it's legacy. It's a legacy that they leave behind in their community because they have influenced the following generation of young people. Very exciting. And so what you do is you end up creating a discipleship-rich environment. We tend to think of discipleship as one-on-one, but that's not necessarily true, or not necessarily the only way of doing discipleship. In many ways, your discipleship is taking place as a group. You're learning things as a group. And so you're creating this discipleship-rich environment. In the club program, the overarching question is, where is God in all of this? As they're thinking about the various issues of the day. As they get involved in leadership, they're asking the questions of, well, okay, how can I lead, and how can I do this well? And how do I, in my uniqueness, contribute to the good and the betterment of the young people that are following after me? I don't want them to go in a direction that other people are going in the neighborhood. How can I help them? How can I encourage them? It's a discipleship-rich environment. In fact, we came up with a phrase: potential and hope ignite when children see, modeled by youth from their neighborhood, possibilities for their own lives. And so your youth ministry becomes a discipleship-rich environment.